Capricorn, take a slow breath with me. If you found this message right now, this is not random, and it's not late. You didn't survive everything you survived just to keep struggling. 2026 isn't coming to test you. It's coming to pay you back. For the nights you stayed strong in silence. For the responsibilities no one helped you carry. For choosing discipline when quitting would have been easier. If you're ready to receive what's finally yours, type, "I receive my payoff" in the comments below. Because what's opening for you now is not a moment. It's the beginning of a much bigger chapter. Capricorn, stay with me here. There's something quiet happening around you right now. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. It's the kind of shift you don't notice all at once. You feel it in your chest first, in the way your shoulders don't tense as quickly anymore, in the way the night feels a little less heavy than it used to. You've carried so much for so long that struggle started to feel normal, like background noise, like gravity. And you learned how to move through life without asking to be seen, without expecting relief, without waiting for applause. You just kept going, night after night, decision after decision, doing what had to be done even when no one understood the cost. There were moments you questioned yourself quietly, not out loud, just in those private seconds before sleep. Why does it feel like I'm always the strong one? Why does it feel like I'm always the responsible one? Why does doing the right thing take so much out of me? And maybe you didn't need an answer then. Maybe you just needed someone to notice. So let me say this clearly, without rushing it. Nothing you endured disappeared into nothing. Every sacrifice, every delay, every time you chose restraint over impulse, every time you stayed grounded while others fell apart, it all stayed with you, it shaped you, it built something solid inside you. And now that solidity is what the future recognizes, because 2026 doesn't respond to wishful thinking. It responds to weight, to consistency, to someone who can hold what's coming without dropping it. That's why this year feels different when you think about it. Not exciting in a loud way, but steady, assured, earned. Like standing on firm ground after a long climb. Like finally seeing the horizon without bracing for impact. You're not being rushed forward, you're being met where you already are. And if you listen closely, you might notice something else. A subtle permission. To soften a little. To breathe without guilt. To imagine stability without immediately preparing for loss. That's not weakness, that's readiness. Because the kind of rewards coming toward you don't need you to fight for them. They need you present, clear, open enough to receive. So if there's a part of you that's still waiting for the other shoe to drop, I want you to sit with that feeling for a moment. Ask yourself gently, what if this time nothing is taken away? What if the work is already done? And what's left is simply allowing things to arrive? You don't have to rush the answer, just let the question settle. Because the path ahead isn't asking you to prove yourself anymore, it's asking something much quieter. Can you trust what you've built enough to stand still and let it work for you? And as that realization sinks in, you may start to feel it. Not hope, not excitement, but a calm knowing. The kind that only comes when something real is finally moving toward you. All right, stay right here with me. Let the night slow down a little. Because if there's one thing I know about you, Capricorn, it's that exhaustion doesn't always show on your face. It settles deeper than that. You didn't just get tired in your body, you got tired in your bones. In the quiet places no one checks on. You've been the strong one for so long that strength stopped feeling like a choice. It became an expectation. You carried people who leaned too hard. You held space for responsibilities that never asked if you were okay. You stepped up when it would have been easier to step away. And you did it without announcing it, without keeping score, without waiting for anyone to come save you. Some days it felt like life handed you a weight and then quietly walked away. Family needs, work demands, unspoken promises you felt obligated to keep. Even the things that weren't yours to fix somehow ended up in your hands. And there were moments, maybe more than you ever admitted, where you paused long enough to wonder why doing the right thing seemed to cost you so much. Why integrity felt heavier than shortcuts. Why patience felt punished. Why your effort didn't always come back in the same season you gave it. You asked that question quietly, usually late at night, when no one needed anything from you for a moment. Why do I keep losing ground when I'm the one showing up? And maybe the answer didn't come then. Because it couldn't. Some roads are built to stretch you, not to break you, but to give you distance. Distance so long that by the time you look back, you realize how far you've actually traveled. You weren't walking an easy road, you were walking a lasting one. The kind that doesn't reward noise, the kind that doesn't respond to rushing, the kind that only reveals its value over time. That's why it felt lonely sometimes. That's why it felt unfair. Not because you were wrong, but because you were early in your endurance, early in your growth, early in becoming someone who could hold more without losing yourself. And here's the part I want you to really sit with, just for a breath. Nothing you carried was wasted, not the effort, not the restraint, not the moments you chose responsibility over relief. Those years didn't take from you, they shaped you. They taught you how to stand when things aren't balanced yet, how to stay grounded when life feels uneven. And that steadiness, that quiet resilience is exactly what's beginning to matter now. You don't need to replay the past anymore. You don't need to justify how hard it was. The road you chose already speaks for itself. And as you move forward, you may notice something subtle shifting inside you. A release, a loosening, a sense that you no longer have to brace for impact. Because the path ahead doesn't ask you to prove your strength again, it asks something gentler. Can you allow the weight to lift without feeling like you're losing control? Can you trust that endurance has finally done its job? Just let that question rest with you. No pressure, no answer needed yet. Only the quiet sense that something long carried is beginning to set you down. All right, stay with me. Let the quiet do its work. Because what begins to unfold now does not rush towards you. It doesn't need to. Stability never announces itself loudly. It arrives the way morning light does, slow, certain, unarguable. You may not notice it all at once, Capricorn. At first, it feels like fewer knots in your stomach when you wake up. Like checking your phone without bracing for bad news. Like breathing a little deeper without forcing it. Nothing dramatic changes overnight, and that's how you know it's real. For so long, your life has required constant vigilance. Watching the numbers, watching the timing, watching the people around you. Every decision carried a layer of fear beneath it. What if this goes wrong? What if I can't recover? What if I don't have a safety net? You learned how to survive inside that tension. You became skilled at it. So skilled that survival started to feel like the baseline. But something shifts here. Quietly. You begin to notice that money is no longer the first thought in every choice. Not because you have excess, but because you have room. Room to breathe. Room to pause. Room to decide without panic in your chest. Bills no longer chase you through the month. They become manageable, predictable, contained. And that changes everything. Because when fear steps back, clarity steps forward. And you start making decisions from a steadier place. You don't reach, you don't scramble, you don't overextend yourself to prove worth. You choose what makes sense, what lasts, what respects the work you've already put in. This is the kind of stability that honors time. It doesn't reward shortcuts. It doesn't favor noise. It settles around people who know how to hold it. You may notice that your pace changes too. You move with more intention. You speak with less urgency. You stop explaining yourself so much. Not because you've become indifferent, but because you no longer need to justify your ground. You earned this footing. And there's a subtle dignity that comes with that. A quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't need recognition to feel real. You're not chasing security anymore. You're standing inside it. And with that comes something even more valuable. Choice. Choice without fear. Choice without desperation. Choice without that familiar voice asking what happens if this fails. Because failure no longer feels fatal, it feels survivable. And that alone changes how you see the future. This is where living begins to replace enduring. Not in grand gestures, but in the everyday moments. Buying something because you want it, not because you waited years to justify it. Saying no without guilt. Saying yes without anxiety. Letting rest exist without needing to earn it. And maybe part of you doesn't trust this yet. That's understandable. You've lived too long in preparation mode. Too long assuming stability was temporary. So if you feel yourself scanning for danger even as things calm down, just notice that habit with kindness. It kept you alive once. It doesn't need to lead anymore. Because the ground beneath you now is not about survival. It's about continuity. About something steady enough to build the rest of your life on. And as you stand here in this quieter space, you may feel a new question forming. If I am no longer fighting to stay afloat, what am I free to become? You don't need to answer that yet. Just let it sit. Because this calm, this steadiness is not the end of anything. It is simply the moment when you realize you are no longer running out of ground and something meaningful has room to arrive. All right, stay right here with me, because when the ground steadies beneath you, the work begins to reveal itself in a new way. For a long time, your effort lived in the shadows. You showed up early, stayed late, handled what others avoided, and still you felt unseen, like your value was measured by output, not by depth. But something changes here, not suddenly, not loudly. It changes the way eyes begin to linger on your work, the way conversations shift when you enter the room, the way your name carries weight without you needing to push it forward. You may notice it first in small moments, a pause before someone responds to you, a decision that now includes your voice by default, an offer that doesn't ask you to prove yourself again. You're no longer explaining your worth, you're standing inside it. This is what happens when effort matures, when discipline compounds, when consistency finally reaches a point where it cannot be ignored. Your work starts to speak before you do, and that brings relief. A deep one. Because for so long you felt like you had to carry the whole structure on your back, hold it together, make it make sense, protect it from collapse. Now the structure holds you too. If you're working within a system, you may feel the climb ease, not because it's effortless, but because resistance softens. Doors open that once felt sealed. Progress feels less like friction and more like alignment. If you've built something of your own, you may notice the pace steady. No frantic scrambling, no chasing the next thing just to survive. Growth becomes deliberate, measured, sustainable. The kind of growth that doesn't burn you out. The kind that lets you sleep at night knowing tomorrow won't undo today. And if you've learned to be cautious with money, that instinct doesn't disappear. It evolves. You don't gamble. You assess. You choose safety without fear, vision without recklessness. Your relationship with money becomes quieter, healthier, less emotional. It stops being a source of pressure and starts becoming a tool, a way to support your life instead of controlling it. And here's something important, something worth pausing on. This isn't about winning fast, it's about being positioned correctly. The kind of success forming around you now doesn't need constant maintenance. It doesn't ask you to sacrifice your peace to keep it. It respects your time, your limits, your long view. You begin to notice that you're no longer driven by urgency. You don't rush to prove relevance. You don't feel threatened by someone else's momentum. Because you know where you stand, and standing there you start to see the difference between effort and overexertion. Between commitment and depletion. You choose better now. You choose work that reflects who you are, not just what you can endure. And maybe for the first time in a long while, your ambition feels clean, unburdened. It's not fueled by fear anymore. It's guided by clarity. You're not chasing validation. You're allowing recognition to arrive when it's earned. And it is earned. Every late night, every careful choice, every moment you held the long view while others cut corners. That's why what's forming now feels solid beneath your feet. Not flashy, not fragile, just real. And as you settle into that truth, you may sense something else stirring quietly. A readiness, not to work harder, but to work wiser, to let what you've built begin to give back to you. And that realization doesn't rush in. It settles, like the feeling of standing at the edge of something meaningful and knowing you don't need to push anymore. You've already arrived at the place where your effort finally knows where to land. All right, let me stay close with you here, because when something meaningful finally begins to move toward you, it doesn't arrive with noise. It doesn't ask for permission. It simply appears when you are steady enough to notice it. You've heard that phrase before. Your ship is coming in. And maybe in the past it sounded distant, almost poetic. Something meant for other people, but this time it feels different in your body. Less like hope, more like recognition. Because this is not about asking anymore, not about wishing harder, not about waiting for a break. It's about position. You didn't stumble into this moment, Capricorn. You stood here, patiently, deliberately. You learned when to move, when to pause, when to hold your ground instead of chasing the tide. And that's the part most people never see. They think opportunity favors luck, but you know better. Opportunity favors readiness. There were moments you could have forced things, taken shortcuts, said yes to paths that looked shiny but felt wrong in your gut. And you didn't, even when waiting hurt, even when others passed you by. That restraint mattered, because the kind of opportunity approaching you now doesn't need to be managed with panic. It needs to be held with clarity. You're steady enough now to recognize what's real, sharp enough to see through what costs too much, grounded enough to say yes without losing yourself. That's why this opening doesn't feel chaotic. It feels intentional. You may notice it arrives quietly, a conversation that lingers longer than expected, a door that opens without you knocking twice, a chance that feels familiar, as if it's been circling you for some time. And when it shows itself, you don't rush toward it. You stand still, you breathe, you assess. That alone tells you how far you've come. Because there was a time you might have grabbed at anything that promised relief, a time when urgency made decisions for you. That version of you is no longer driving. Now you meet opportunity eye to eye. You feel its weight, its responsibility. You understand that what arrives next will shape more than just your schedule. It will shape your rhythm, your energy, your life. And here's the truth that deserves a pause. Not every opportunity is meant to be chased, but the ones meant for you don't require pursuit. They arrive when you're capable of holding them without collapsing under their weight. This could show up as financial movement, something that shifts your long-term security. It could show up as work that finally matches your capacity, not just your output. It could arrive as an offer you once believed was reserved for someone else. And when it does, you won't feel overwhelmed. You'll feel calm. Because deep down, you recognize this moment. It mirrors the version of you that stayed disciplined when no one was watching. That kept building when progress felt invisible. That chose endurance over ego. And maybe that's why it feels almost familiar, like something you've been preparing for without realizing it. So if you sense a quiet confidence growing in you now, if you feel less urgency and more presence, that's not coincidence. That's alignment. You're not standing on the shore hoping anymore. You're already in the place where arrival makes sense. And as the horizon begins to shift almost imperceptibly, there's a knowing that settles in your chest. Not excitement, not fear, just readiness. Because what's approaching you now doesn't ask who you were. It responds to who you've become. And that awareness, that grounded certainty, is what allows the moment to unfold without resistance. You don't reach for it. You let it come to you. And in that stillness, you may begin to notice something else awakening quietly. A willingness to receive without questioning your worth. A sense that what's arriving is not more than you can handle. It's exactly what you're built for. All right, stay with me a little longer. Because there's one thing I need to say to you gently. Not as a warning, not as advice, but as a truth spoken softly the way you'd say it to someone you care about. You've mastered discipline, Capricorn. It's in your bones, in the way you structure your days, in how you hold yourself together when things get heavy. Discipline kept you safe. It helped you survive seasons that would have broken other people. But sometimes, without realizing it, discipline quietly turns into a wall. Not a wall you built out of fear, a wall you built out of responsibility. You learned how to lock your heart so nothing could throw you off balance, so nothing could distract you, so nothing could slow you down. And for a long time, that worked. You didn't let yourself rest because rest felt like falling behind. You didn't let yourself feel joy fully because joy felt fragile. You didn't let yourself receive easily because receiving meant depending. So you stayed contained, controlled, capable. But here's the part that deserves a pause. The same walls that protected you can quietly block what's trying to reach you now. Not punishment, not loss, but ease. You're standing at a moment in your life where strength alone is no longer the requirement. What's arriving next needs something different from you. It needs softness without collapse, openness without loss of control. And I know that sounds uncomfortable, maybe even risky, because you've been the one others rely on, the one who keeps things moving, the one who doesn't ask for much. So letting your guard down feels unnatural, almost irresponsible, but this isn't about becoming weak. It's about becoming receptive. There's a difference. Receptive doesn't mean careless. It means allowing good things to land without interrogating them first. It means letting rest exist without immediately turning it into a task. It means letting someone offer support without feeling like you owe them your independence. You don't have to change who you are. You don't have to abandon discipline. You're just being asked to soften the grip, just enough for life to move through you instead of constantly pushing against you. You may notice that when you ease even slightly, things respond faster. Opportunities align more smoothly. Conversations flow without effort. Decisions feel lighter in your body, not rushed, not forced, simply clear. That's not coincidence. That's energy moving without resistance. And if part of you wonders what happens if I relax too much, what if things fall apart? I want you to notice that fear with kindness. It kept you alert when you needed it. It doesn't need to lead anymore. Because you're not at the beginning of the climb now. You're not scrambling for stability. You're in a place where strength is already proven. What's being asked of you now is trust. Trust that rest won't erase progress. Trust that joy won't undo discipline. Trust that receiving won't make you small. It will make you balanced. And balance is what allows momentum to sustain itself. So if you feel yourself holding your breath even as things begin to open, just notice it. Slow it down. Let your shoulders drop. Let your chest expand just a little. You don't have to open all the way. You just have to stop locking the door. Because when you do, you'll realize something quietly powerful. Nothing you've built disappears when you soften. It becomes easier to carry. And as that realization settles, you may sense a subtle shift inside you. A readiness to enjoy what you've earned. Not defensively, not cautiously, but calmly. And that calm, that gentle permission to receive creates space for something even more meaningful to move in. Not as pressure, not as obligation, but as a natural extension of the life you've been preparing for all along. All right, let's stay right here together. Because something subtle begins to change now. Not outside of you. Inside. You may not even have words for it at first. It feels like a release you didn't know you were holding back. Like finally setting something heavy down after carrying it for years without complaint. You've lived a long time in endurance mode, waking up already braced, moving through your days with purpose, but rarely with softness. You did what needed to be done, again and again, not because it felt good, but because it was necessary. And that habit of endurance became part of your identity. You learned how to keep going even when your body asked for rest. You learned how to delay joy until everything else was handled. You learned how to deny yourself so the structure wouldn't collapse. But something about 2026 feels different in your bones. Not urgent, not demanding, inviting. There's a quiet permission in the air now, a sense that you don't have to earn every moment of ease anymore. That caring for yourself is no longer a luxury or a distraction. It's part of the design. You may notice it in small choices first, taking a break without explaining why, spending on yourself without justifying it, letting your body slow down without immediately feeling behind. And instead of guilt, there's calm. That's new. You begin to realize that taking care of yourself doesn't weaken your foundation, it strengthens it. Because when you are rested, you are clearer. When you are nourished, you are more present. When you allow yourself pleasure, you don't lose discipline. You gain perspective, you stop surviving your days and start inhabiting them. There's a difference between existing under pressure and living with intention. And you can feel that line shifting now. You're no longer proving your resilience. That chapter is complete. Now, resilience becomes something quieter, something gentler, something that supports you instead of draining you. You invest in yourself differently now, not impulsively, not to impress, but thoughtfully. Time, energy, attention. You choose where they go with care, and the reward isn't applause, it's peace. The kind of peace that doesn't announce itself. It just settles in and stays. You begin to enjoy what you've built without scanning for what might go wrong next. You allow pride to exist without turning it into pressure. There's a dignity in that, a deep one, because for so long you equated worth with sacrifice, value with depletion. Now you're learning something new, that fulfillment can coexist with stability, that joy doesn't erase responsibility, that ease doesn't undo effort. And maybe that realization brings a moment of stillness, a pause where you recognize yourself again, not as the one who carries everything, but as the one who has arrived. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to explain it. You feel it. A quiet pride, not loud, not performative, just steady. And as you stand in that steadiness, there's a gentle shift in how you relate to the future. You're no longer looking at what's ahead with clenched fists. You're open, curious, present. Because living no longer feels like something you have to push through. It feels like something you're allowed to experience. And that permission, that simple, powerful permission, changes the rhythm of everything. You breathe deeper, you move slower, you trust more. And without realizing it, you've stopped living just to endure. You're living because your life finally has room to be lived. And in that room, with nothing forcing you forward, something meaningful begins to take shape. Not as a burden, not as a challenge, but as a quiet continuation of everything you've become strong enough to hold. All right, stay with me through this last quiet stretch. Not because anything needs to be explained, but because some things are meant to be felt before they're understood. You've reached a place now where effort is no longer the currency being asked of you. Not more discipline, not more sacrifice, not more endurance. You've already paid in full. What's being asked now is something different, something subtler, and for you, maybe even harder. Belief. Not the loud kind, not the kind that tries to convince anyone, but the steady belief that you are worthy of what you've built. Because here's the truth, Capricorn, you've been trained by life to expect resistance, to assume that ease comes with a catch, to wonder when the ground might shift again. So when things finally begin to work, when stability holds, when doors stay open instead of slamming shut, a part of you may hesitate. You might question it, downplay it, tell yourself not to get too comfortable. That reflex is understandable. It kept you alert when uncertainty ruled your days, but it doesn't need to guide you anymore. This moment isn't asking you to push forward, it's asking you to stand still long enough to let the truth land. That what's unfolding now is not accidental, not borrowed, not temporary. It belongs to you. You don't have to earn it again tomorrow. You don't have to justify it to anyone. You don't have to explain how hard it was to get here. Your story already holds that weight. What matters now is whether you allow yourself to receive without suspicion, whether you let success settle instead of bracing for loss, whether you trust that the version of you who survived is also capable of sustaining what arrives. That trust doesn't come all at once. It arrives gently, in small moments of ease, in mornings that feel calmer, in nights where your mind finally rests. You'll recognize it when you stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios, when you begin to plan with hope instead of caution, when the future feels open rather than heavy. And maybe you'll notice something else too. Gratitude, not forced, not performative, just quiet appreciation for the fact that you didn't give up when it would have been understandable to do so, for the way you kept showing up even when the reward was delayed, for the integrity you maintained even when shortcuts were available. That integrity shaped this moment. And now life responds accordingly. You're not being tested anymore. You're being trusted. Trusted with stability. Trusted with abundance. Trusted with a chapter that doesn't require suffering to justify its value. So if there's one thing to hold on to as everything continues to unfold, let it be this. You don't need to become someone new to receive what's coming. You don't need to work harder. You don't need to prove anything. You only need to stop pushing it away. Let the results stay. Let the peace deepen. Let the life you've been building begin to support you in return. Because everything you endured, every long night, every heavy season, every moment you chose responsibility over relief, it all led you here. Not to a finish line, but to a place where effort finally transforms into reward. And as that realization settles in, there's a calm knowing that follows. This is not the end of the road. It's the moment where the road finally starts giving back everything you put into it. All right? Before we close this space tonight, stay with me for just a moment longer. Because if you've listened all the way to here, it means something inside you already knows. You didn't stumble into this message. You didn't stay by accident. Some part of you recognized yourself in these words, the endurance, the patience, the quiet strength that never needed applause. And maybe the surprise isn't that 2026 brings reward. Maybe the surprise is realizing you're finally ready to let that reward stay. Capricorn, you've spent so much of your life being the one others lean on. Tonight, let this be a place where you lean back. Let yourself feel the truth settle in. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not overlooked. You are right on time for a life that no longer requires suffering to justify its worth. If this message spoke to you, if something softened or opened while you were listening, take a second and let me know. Type one simple sentence in the comments. I trust myself now. Not for me, for you. And if you're part of this Capricorn circle, if you value messages that go deeper than predictions and speak to the long road you've actually walked, make sure you stay connected. Subscribe. Not just to a channel, but to the idea that your story matters. Because this is not where the journey ends. This is where it begins to feel different. There are more messages coming, more clarity, more alignment, and they'll find you exactly when you're ready to hear them. Until then, carry this with you. Everything you endured was not wasted. It shaped you into someone who can finally receive what life is ready to give back. Rest in that tonight. Trust yourself. And I'll meet you again right where the next message arrives.